How I found out my husband was cheating on me with his coworker. You know how people say you'll never see it coming? Well, I saw it coming. I just refused to admit it. For months, everything fell off, but I pushed it all aside. I trusted him. I trusted him with everything. That is, until I found a single, innocent-looking text message. And suddenly, I couldn't unsee what I should have seen all along. This is the story of how I discovered the truth, how it destroyed me, and how I walked away. If you've ever been in a relationship that you thought was perfect, well, let me tell you, nothing really is. That's what I learned the hard way. I met Ryan when I was in my early 20s. We were young, excited about life, and in love with the idea of being in love. I thought we had everything figured out. We moved in together, started talking about getting married, building a future. I'd never met anyone who made me feel as safe, as loved, and as secure in my life. Everything we did was like a team effort. We were always together, at home, with friends, on vacations, working side by side in our careers. It was a perfect little bubble. Or at least, that's what I thought. But bubbles, as we all know, are fragile things. It started subtly. I didn't want to admit it to myself at first, but little things began changing. The late-night meetings at work, the odd texts that seemed rushed, the unexplained absences. I make excuses for him. He's working hard. He's under stress. He's probably just tired. But deep down, something in my gut was starting to churn. Still, I ignored it. Who was I to question him? He was my husband, and we had built everything together. But one evening, everything changed. It wasn't even anything dramatic at first. It was just an innocent phone call I overheard. I had walked into the living room to grab my phone charger, and I heard him talking to someone. He sounded off. He was laughing in that way that made him sound too comfortable. It was that kind of laughter you reserve for a close friend, not a coworker. I tried to shake it off, tell myself it was nothing. But then the phone rang, and I noticed it was a text from someone named Mia. I had never heard of Mia. When I asked him about it later, he just brushed it off, said she was a colleague from work who needed help with the project. Sure, that made sense, but I didn't buy it. The first real clue came a few weeks later. He'd been coming home later and later from work, always with the same tired excuse. There's a project deadline. But this time, something fell off. I didn't want to believe it, but I just knew. I had this overwhelming feeling that something wasn't right. So, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked his phone. I know. It sounded dramatic, and maybe it was. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. What I found wasn't just suspicious. It was heartbreaking. I found dozens of messages between Ryan and Mia. Some of them were innocent enough. Work stuff, project updates, simple texts. But others were something entirely different. There were inside jokes, flirtations, and texts that lingered well into the night. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they communicated. The ease with which they spoke. The comfort they shared. It made my blood run cold. The worst part? They were planning something. A dinner. A getaway. He was planning a trip with her. Not for work, but for them. I had no idea how to process it. I wasn't angry yet. I was just confused. Shocked. I had been living in this bubble for so long, believing that everything was fine. And now, I was seeing it all for what it truly was, a lie. I confronted him that night, but you know what? He denied it. He lied straight to my face. He tried to tell me I was overreacting, that I had misunderstood, that nothing was going on between them. But I didn't believe him. Not anymore. My heart was broken, my trust shattered, and the man I thought I knew seemed like a stranger. In the days that followed, I kept replaying everything in my mind. I was obsessed with the details. The way he looked at his phone when Mia texted him. The way he never quite seemed as engaged when we spent time together. It all started to make sense now. His late hours, the excuses, the secretiveness. This wasn't just work stress. It was her. But there was something else that hit me even harder. I hadn't just caught him in the act. I caught me not listening to the signs, not trusting my instincts. How had I gotten here? How had I let this happen? I wasn't a fool, or at least I didn't think I was. But this betrayal? It felt like a sucker punch to the gut. I wasn't sure what to do. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But I also wasn't sure if I was ready to walk away. I loved him. I didn't want to believe that he could do this to me, that he could betray me in such a brutal way. But I also knew that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to repair. Then came the day that changed everything. Ryan left his email open, his work email, and there it was, the confirmation. He had been seeing Mia for months, meeting her outside of work, going out for drinks, staying in hotels. And the worst part? He had been telling me he was working late, but in reality, he was with her. I packed a bag that night. I didn't tell him I was leaving. I didn't need to. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I needed to get out. I needed space. The worst part about this whole situation wasn't that I caught him. It was the realization that I had been living a lie for so long. I had been so blinded by my love for him, by the life we had built together, that I hadn't seen the truth when it was right in front of me. I spent the next few days at my sister's house, trying to figure out what to do next. I went through all the stages: anger, sadness, confusion. But the one thing that kept repeating in my mind was, you deserve better than this. I didn't want to be the woman who stayed with a cheating husband. I didn't want to be the one who made excuses or forgave him just because I loved him. No, I deserved someone who valued me, who saw me for who I was, and who wouldn't betray me in the way he did. It took a while, but I finally moved out. I found an apartment of my own, signed a lease, and started fresh. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I missed him, moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision. But as the days passed, the fog of betrayal began to lift. I started to focus on myself again. I reconnected with old friends. I traveled. I found new hobbies. And most importantly, I found my self-worth again. It's been a year now since I left him. I've moved on, and I've learned that healing doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. I won't lie, it was painful. It still stings when I think about the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. But I also know that I'm stronger than I was before. I'm proud of the woman I've become. And as for Ryan, well, I heard he's still with Mia. But that's not my business anymore. I don't need to keep watching their drama unfold. I've got my own life to live now, and trust me, it's a lot better without him in it. As the months went by, life slowly but surely started to piece itself back together. I can't say it was easy, though. There were days when I would wake up in the morning and feel the weight of everything that had happened come crashing back down. Some days, I'd just stare at the wall, unsure of what to do next. My confidence, my trust, and my sense of security all shattered in the blink of an eye. But here's the thing. I began to realize that as painful as the betrayal was, it didn't define me. It wasn't my fault that Ryan had cheated on me. It wasn't a reflection of my worth. I had put so much of myself into our marriage, into our life together, but when it was over, I had to learn to put that energy into myself. I focused on rediscovering who I was. I began to write again, something I had always loved, but had abandoned during the years I'd spent trying to make my marriage work. I started running. I took up yoga. Small steps, but every step felt like I was reclaiming a part of me that had been lost in the relationship. I met new people too. One of the things I realized was that I'd spent so much time being wrapped up in Ryan's world, in his coworkers, in his life, that I had neglected to maintain my own friendships. I reached out to old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some of them were shocked by what had happened, but they were supportive. They were there for me in a way I didn't expect, and it reminded me that I wasn't alone. I wasn't just Ryan's wife. I was me. But even as I moved on, there were things I couldn't forget. The feeling of being deceived by someone I trusted with my life. The nights I lay awake, wondering how long it had been going on. The sense of self-doubt that crept in, asking if I had done something wrong, if I had missed the signs. And then, one day, I saw Ryan again. It wasn't planned. I was walking through the local grocery store, grabbing some fresh fruit, when I turned the corner, and there he was, standing in the produce aisle, looking as if nothing had changed. He was wearing the same look on his face, the one he always wore when he was trying to hide something. For a moment, I stood there frozen, the memories flooding back. But I didn't feel anger. Not at first. I just felt him. He turned and saw me too. His face shifted instantly, from surprise to guilty, then quickly trying to mask it with a smile. He took a few steps toward me. "Hey," he said, his voice tentative, like he wasn't sure how to approach me. "I didn't think I'd run into you here." I didn't smile. I didn't move closer. I just stared at him for a second. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of confronting him or even hearing him apologize. "I didn't think I'd run into you either," I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a long pause. Neither of us knew what to say. The silence hung in the air, awkward and thick. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I wasn't going to let him try and minimize what he had done. "Is Mia still around?" I asked, casually, as if I wasn't emotionally invested in the answer. His face tightened, and I could see the guilt rush through him. I don't think that's really any of your business anymore, don't you think?" I raised an eyebrow. "Right, of course. But it was my business when you were married to me, wasn't it?" He flinched, as if my words hit him harder than I intended. But it didn't matter. I didn't know him anything. "I don't want to do this," he said, looking down at the floor. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really sorry." And just like that, everything I'd been feeling, anger, pain, the years of frustration and heartache came rushing back. But this time, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel like I was being dragged down by his apology. I simply didn't care anymore. "I don't need your apology, Ryan," I said, turning to walk away. "You've already shown me who you really are." And with that, I left. I walked out of the store without looking back, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need closure from him. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need him at all. A few months later, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be, truly happy again. It was different from before, different from the version of myself I had been when I was married. But that was okay. I was learning to embrace who I had become, the person who didn't let betrayal define her. I traveled. I went on spontaneous trips with friends, and even on my own. I found strength in doing things on my own terms. I rediscovered my passion for writing. I published a short novel that had been sitting on my desk for years. I started volunteering at a local shelter, giving back and doing something meaningful. And no, I didn't jump into another relationship right away. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I wasn't searching for someone to fix the pieces Ryan had broken. I was focused on me, the woman who had walked away from something toxic, the woman who was starting over. When I eventually did meet someone, it wasn't out of need. It wasn't because I was looking for someone to save me. It was because I felt complete in myself. He was kind, funny, and respectful in my past. He didn't try to erase it. Instead, he embraced the person I had become. But what mattered most wasn't the new relationship. What mattered was that I had learned how to trust myself again. I had found my strength in the aftermath of heartbreak. I had found my voice. As for Ryan, he and Mia are still together. And every now and then, I think about how it felt to catch him, how his betrayal almost broke me. But I don't dwell on it anymore, because I know, deep in my heart, that I'm better off without him. Life goes on, and for the first time in a long time, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, on my own, rebuilding, and finally living life on my terms. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think you've hit rock bottom, that you can't go any lower, but then one day, you look up and realize you've climbed out of the hole you thought you'd be stuck in forever. And that's where I was now. Out of the hole, standing tall, even though the scars were still there. But instead of feeling broken, I was beginning to feel whole again. Months had passed since I last saw Ryan. It wasn't easy, not by any means, but with each day, I learned to let go a little more. I threw myself into my work, my passions, and most importantly, I threw myself into self-care. I had moments of doubt, moments where I'd lie awake at night and wonder if I'd made the right choice. But then I'd remember the coldness in his eyes when he lied to me, the way he casually turned his back on everything we built together for something so meaningless. I couldn't allow myself to go back to that. So I moved on, not just physically, but emotionally. It took longer than I thought, but slowly, I stopped feeling that gnawing emptiness. I found myself laughing again, enjoying life in a way I hadn't in years. I went on weekend trips with friends, rediscovered old hobbies, and just lived. It was terrifying at first. Being on my own, starting over was one of the most daunting things I had ever done, but also turned out to be the best thing I'd ever done for myself. I had learned to trust myself again. I realized that I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I didn't need Ryan, and I didn't need a relationship to feel complete. I was enough, and that was a lesson I'd never forget. And then, a few months after our last encounter, something unexpected happened. I got a message from Ryan. It came through one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, a moment of peace before bed. I hadn't heard from him in so long, and I'd almost forgotten about the bitter anger that once consumed me when I thought of him. But there it was, his name flashing on my screen. I took a deep breath before opening the message, unsure of what I would find. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading, but curiosity won out. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a few moments, unsure of what to do. A part of me wanted to ignore it completely, but there was another part of me that thought maybe, just maybe, I owed it to myself to finally hear him out, on my terms, of course. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was with him. I didn't need his apology or his closure, but I was curious what he wanted. I knew I had changed. Maybe he had, too. I typed a quick reply. "What do you want to talk about?" A few minutes later, he responded. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I fucked up, and I want to apologize, truly. I don't know how to make this right." I didn't answer right away. I read it a few times, trying to decide whether or not I was ready to go down that road again. Part of me was tempted to respond, to finally get the closure I had denied myself. But then I remembered everything. The lies, the hurt, the betrayal, the pieces of me that I had left behind in my attempt to love him. I realized that I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to make things right because, in the end, I had already done that for myself. I had rebuilt, I had moved on, and I was in a place where I could look at the situation without bitterness. So, I made a decision. I closed my phone. I didn't respond. I didn't need him to fix anything. I didn't need him to take away the pain he caused. I had learned to live with the scars, and they no longer defined me. The lesson in all of this was not about waiting for the person who hurt you to come back and make amends. The lesson was about finding peace without them. Months later, I met someone new. His name was Ethan. He wasn't like Ryan at all. Ethan was kind, gentle, and never took me for granted. We spent time getting to know each other slowly. There were no rushes, no forced expectations. We just enjoyed each other's company. He had his own life, his own baggage, his own past, but he never compared it to mine. He was patient, understanding, and most of all, he never made me feel like I had to explain myself. He appreciated me for who I was, not the woman I used to be, the one who was constantly second-guessing herself in a toxic relationship. Ethan never pushed me to open up more than I was ready to. He didn't force me into things, and that was exactly what I needed. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized that what I had with Ryan wasn't love. It was a shadow of it, built on promises that weren't kept, built on trust that was broken. With Ethan, I wasn't afraid to be myself. I didn't have to second-guess his every move, wonder if he was lying, or worry about whether he was seeing someone else. But what made this new relationship truly special wasn't just how Ethan treated me. It was how I treated myself. I had finally learned to love myself in a way I hadn't before. I had let go of my past and stopped measuring my worth by someone else's actions. I was happy, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan and I eventually moved in together. It felt right. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't a rebound. It was something I chose because I had come to a place where I was ready for something real, something based on trust, communication, and mutual respect. As for Ryan, I heard through mutual friends that he and Mia had gotten serious, and part of me wanted to feel vindicated. After all, he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But if I'm being honest, I didn't care anymore. He was part of my past, and that was where he was staying. It's funny. When I look back, I realize how much power I gave to that man, how much power I gave to the idea of a marriage, of loyalty. But in the end, I was the one who held the key to my own happiness. I was the one who had the strength to walk away, to rebuild, and to find love again, not from someone else, but from within myself. And now I'm living the life I always wanted, one where I get to choose who I trust, who I love, and most importantly, who I am. Because, in the end, the best revenge isn't about making someone else regret their actions. It's about making sure that you never let anyone else's mistakes define who you are. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons, doesn't it? After everything I went through with Ryan, I expected to feel broken forever. I thought I'd always carry that weight with me. The betrayal, the lies, the sense of being blindsided. I thought I'd always look at every new relationship, every new encounter with suspicion, waiting for the inevitable heartbreak. But here's the kicker. Time doesn't just heal wounds. Time forces you to face them, forces you to either break down or rebuild. And somehow, through all of the pain, through all of the heartbreak, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd be capable of, moving on. It wasn't a dramatic shift. It wasn't an epiphany where everything suddenly made sense. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process. One day, I woke up and realized that the sadness wasn't there anymore, or at least not the same way. I wasn't consumed by it. The ache wasn't constant. Instead, there was a quiet kind of peace, something that had been missing for a long time. By now, I was used to being alone, and strangely enough, I didn't feel lonely. I had started to enjoy my own company. I could go on weekend hikes without feeling like there was a hole in my heart, or spend an afternoon at a cafe without thinking of all the things I wished I had done differently. But the real turning point came when I least expected it. One evening, I was sitting in my favorite park, reading a book, the sun beginning to set. The air was crisp, the sky a shade of pink and orange, and I felt at peace. It was the kind of calm that had eluded me for so long. And as I sat there, I saw him. Ryan. He was walking across the park with Mia. I'll admit, my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't because I still cared about him. It wasn't because I was angry. It was just weird. I hadn't seen him in months, and seeing him again, especially with her, was like reopening a door I'd thought I'd sealed shut for good. They didn't see me at first. They were laughing, talking like they didn't have a care in the world. And then Mia caught my eye. Her face went pale for a split second, and I could see the panic flash in her eyes. But Ryan? He didn't seem to notice. He just smiled, not even realizing the awkwardness of the situation. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to get involved in their drama. So I closed my book, stood up, and started to walk away. But then Ryan called out to me. "Hey, wait," he shouted. "Can we talk for a second?" I paused, but didn't turn around. I could feel him walking toward me, and I could feel that familiar sense of unease in my stomach. But it wasn't the same feeling it once was. The anger, the heartbreak, it was gone. It had faded over time, replaced by a cool, almost indifferent kind of clarity. "Why do you want to talk?" I said, turning slowly to face him. Mia was standing behind him, looking nervous, like she wasn't sure whether she should be there. But I wasn't here for her. This wasn't her battle to fight. Ryan opened his mouth to say something, but he seemed to hesitate. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything, for the lies, for what I did to you." I didn't respond at first. His words hung in the air, but I wasn't sure what to say. It wasn't that I hadn't heard him before, or that I hadn't thought about it 100 times. It was that, in that moment, I realized that his apology didn't matter to me anymore. "I've heard that before," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "And I don't need to hear it again, Ryan." He looked taken aback, his face filled with confusion and regret. But I wasn't interested in sorting through his emotions anymore. I wasn't the one who had been unfaithful. I wasn't the one who had shattered everything we'd built. "I'm not the person I was when you last saw me," I said, meeting his gaze. "I've moved on, and I'm not interested in going back to what we had, or in being a part of whatever this is." I nodded toward Mia, who was standing off to the side, awkwardly shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "This isn't my problem anymore." Ryan stood there, dumbfounded, like he couldn't quite grasp what I was saying. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to make him understand. I had spent so long trying to make him see me, trying to make him feel the weight of what he'd done. But I was done. I had moved on. I had found peace, and it wasn't wrapped up in him. Without another word, I turned around and walked away. The sounds of the park faded behind me, and I didn't look back. A few weeks later, I bumped into Ethan again. He had become a part of my life, someone who respected my past without trying to erase it. He was patient and kind, and though we'd only been casually dating for a few months, I found myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to give this thing a chance. I wasn't rushing into it, and I wasn't expecting it to heal all my wounds, but I was open to the idea of love again. It wasn't about moving on to someone else. It wasn't about replacing Ryan. It was about realizing that I deserved love, and that didn't have to come from someone who had already proven unworthy of it. Ethan made me laugh again, made me see that there was more to life than the scars I had carried. It's strange, isn't it? You go through something so deeply painful, so utterly gut-wrenching, and yet you come out the other side stronger. It's like a storm that blows through your life and leaves everything torn apart. But then you look around and realize that the pieces are scattered in a way that you can rebuild from. I still don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring things out, still learning to trust again. But I'm okay with that. For the first time in years, I'm living life on my terms. And that's something I never thought I'd say.